book of Day Trinitati does it talk about
You're trying to
relation?
obfuscate for your dumb
Hey,
audience.
what book of
That is how badly Nicaea II has kind of screwed up Christendom.
And then shame on you Protestants. Let me tell you why.
Don't consider converting to Orthodoxy.
We're not preaching the same gospel. It's the Bible and
witches?
Are we losing the plot here just a little bit? Interdenominational apologetics seems to be at an all-time high these days. I feel like every time I log onto this platform, someone is critiquing a different sect of Christianity. I think any of those people are bad, or most of them at least, and nor do I think that apologetics in and of itself is bad, or interdenominational apologetics for that matter. I think it's actually quite necessary and differences definitely matter. But I think the way in which that it has evolved to today needs to be addressed and potentially needs to be changed in some ways. If you're familiar with me at all, then you probably saw my last video, which I also kind of laid out my own critique of a certain sect of Christianity, in particular Protestantism. Now, I never thought that anyone would actually see that video, much less the attention that it got. I've used video in the past to just kind of emotionally process and just emotionally dump, and I only decided to post it because I didn't really have anyone to talk about these things with, and so I posted that video hopefully that maybe just 1, 2, maybe 3 people at the most would see it, and maybe one of them would also maybe relate and find some comfort in it. So again, I never imagined anyone would actually see it. So I definitely didn't mean to perpetuate this problem anymore, but I definitely did in some way with that video, and for that I am sorry, and I admit that I did. But I do find a bit solace in the fact that I actually got tons of comments from people who said that they were working through the same thing that I did and they really related, and I articulated a lot of the thoughts that they had already been feeling. So for that, I do definitely find some comfort in. But overall, I never intended to perpetuate the problem that I'm now talking about in this video. With that said, after making that video, it definitely became apparent to me about the dangers of interdenominational apologetics and how it can sometimes be more harm than good. In this video, I want to pose an argument as to why interdenominational apologetics needs to slow down a bit or change its form in some way. And of course, I also want to present a few solutions as to how we can approach this topic with a healthier mindset. There's actually another content creator on this platform named New Kingdom Media, I believe. I'll put his info here and in the description. You should definitely go watch his video. He hit on a lot of the same points that I've been feeling after making my last video. But in this video, I also want to kind of take a little bit of a different approach than he did. The points that I want to argue include the other side of ecclesial anxiety, hypocritical criticisms, and neglecting the truly lost. My solution is twofold: 1, found within the Sermon on the Mount, and 2, reclaiming the title Progressive Christianity. Ecclesial anxiety is something I hear a lot of people talk about. This term is usually used when referring to people who are having anxiety around which tradition or denomination that they should pick within Christianity. This is due to several reasons, but I think one of those is interdenominational apologetics and the constant stream of apologetics out there that's yelling at each other about which denomination is correct and which one isn't. When I see people discussing ecclesial anxiety, they're usually discussing it from the point of entry. So when someone is coming to the faith and they're trying to decide where they should be. But there's another side to it that I don't see a ton of people talk about, which is the reaction to someone who's making a decision who's already a pre-existing Christian. So again, in my last video, I laid out some of my critiques of the Protestant church as a whole. And in that video, I talked a lot about my grievances and problems that I was having within Protestantism. And in that video, I never once actually denied or confirmed if I was actually leaving Protestantism. Like, I was just laying out some of the issues I was having. But people just immediately ran with the idea that I was converting. And so I had the comment section full of Protestants saying that I was abandoning the true faith and joining the traditions of men and a lot of other things as well. But then you also had people from the other traditions just taking the chance to dunk on all the Protestants. And a lot of their comments were equally, if not more, incendiary than the Protestants. I bring all this up to say is that I actually find it quite funny that I never once experienced an ounce of ecclesial anxiety throughout this discernment process. Like, I felt truly fine and confident in my decision making. It wasn't until after I posted that video that I started to experience this ecclesial anxiety because so many people were having a poor reaction to what my thought process was. Because again, in that video, I never once confirmed or denied if I was leaving Protestantism. I was just laying out my thoughts, but people just ran with it. Now, I acknowledge that not all the comments were negative. In fact, there were a lot of very beautiful and kind and sweet comments and messages on that video, and a lot of people were feeling the same way that I was, which was the whole point of that video. But the point that I want to make make here is that, as we all know with human nature, we all tend to focus on the negative versus the positive. I mean, I feel like this is more relevant than ever given the news cycle and social media and just all the things that are going on in our 21st century lives. We all tend to focus on the negative. It's just human nature at this point. And I bring this point up to say I can't imagine someone else going through the same discernment process that I went through who decided to share their thoughts, and possibly that person is less confident than I, or don't have the same support system that I do, or, maybe more sensitive. Like, I can't imagine someone like that going through the same process that I went through and being met with the same negative reaction that I got. And then typically the response to this point is like, oh, it's just the internet. Oh, it's the Wild West. Oh, it's the internet, so everything goes. Like, you can't take it serious. But my response to this is twofold. One, this Nestorian approach to the internet just doesn't work, given the fact that the internet is so interwoven into our daily lives. I mean, just look at the trajectory and the trend that we've been on since its conception in the 80s. The internet today is as assimilated into life as possible. And it's only going to get more interwoven into daily life as we continue on. And two, I don't think the argument of, oh, it's just the internet, don't take it so serious, it's the Wild West, everything goes, isn't super helpful either, due to the fact that that's how people are coming to the faith these days. Gone is the day where people just stroll down to their local church or parish and ask the priest questions. Like, when people have Christian-based questions, they go to the internet. Gone is the day where someone, if they're having a question, even within their own church, I know people still to this day who have told me that they were intimidated or didn't know they could, or the pastor wasn't available, or so on and so forth. And if they had a question about their inner church belief or, something else entirely, they're still going to the internet. Like, that is just a part of daily life. We do that now, even just in our day-to-day lives, faith aside. We have just disconnected from people, and it's just easier to Google and watch YouTube and find these other online sources to help us make our decisions instead of interacting with people. Like, that is just how life is these days. And so when these people are having these questions and they're going to the online sources and they go in there and they just see this pile of vitriol amongst all of us, what do you think that's doing to them? And what is that doing for them? To tie this together to what I was talking about earlier with the reaction to someone making a decision, if someone is questioning their denomination or their faith or whatever the case may be, and they go and they possibly find a video like mine, and they're like, oh, this person is, hitting a lot of the points that I'm feeling right now, and I can relate a lot to it. And then they go to the comment section and they see how people are ripping me apart. They're going to then be scared to voice these opinions themselves. They're going to be scared to ask these questions themselves because they see how negative a reaction someone can possibly get to having similar beliefs or thoughts or questions. And all this is doing is just creating this negative circular feedback loop where you're reacting so poorly to people sharing their thoughts about what could have been a very positive discernment process. Now they're rethinking everything, but the person who's a step or two behind them see how people reacted so negatively to them. They then also don't ever get to go on a positive discernment process either, because now they're terrified to share their thoughts. And now we just have this one big circle of ecclesial anxiety that just doesn't stop. St. Paul says, do everything in love in 1 Corinthians. And no, this doesn't mean that we just affirm bad doctrine or heresy, nor is it me advocating for some weird universalism or theological relativism or anything like that. All I'm saying is that if we don't approach this topic with love, then I think it's going to do more harm than good. I think St. Cyril's letter to Nestorius is actually a beautiful example of this. I mean, Nestorius was literally teaching and affirming heretical theology. But if you read that letter, Cyril is nothing but loving towards Nestorius. He advocates for him as a brother in Christ and advocates for him to drop his bad theology and come back to the true faith. If you read that letter, he never once is immediately calling him a heretic or condemning him to hell or, anything like that. He's loving with how he approaches Nestorius. And this is just a beautiful example of how to approach someone if you disagree with them and think that they're stepping away from the true faith. Love can be firm, love can be pleading, love can definitely be tough, but it should all be love nonetheless. Now, this is a take that I might get some heat for, and if that's the case, then so be it, but I do think it's worth bringing up. The longer that I study these traditions and look at all the other traditions out there and listen to the spokespeople of these traditions, the more that I'm convinced that everyone today would get a letter from St. Paul. I think if you try to just be objective for a minute, you can see where we're all failing in some way. Now, in a video talking about the dangers of interdenominational apologetics, I'm not going to sit here and list out those issues, as that would be a bit hypocritical of me. But again, I think if you were to be objective, you could see that every tradition falls short in some way. And with that said, I find it interesting how quickly we all are to point out the issues that we see in other traditions and other people, and yet we're not willing to look internally first. In Matthew 7, when Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, he literally says to pull the log out of your own eye before you help your brother. And I just feel like we've completely disregarded this teaching. I mean, and downstream of this is a huge issue. I mean, if you don't take the log out of your own eye first, then you're completely neglecting your own home and having your own home in order first. To try to give a relatively neutral example of this so I don't contradict this video and get too much heat from any particular denomination out there, at the time of recording this video, there's been a lot of public discourse around the 10 Commandments in classrooms. And I've actually been fairly vocal against it, or, well, vocal against the people who have been very vocal for it, which honestly, it's his own video entirely, but to bring up the example, for the people who've been very vocally for it and have been shouting on social media and calling their congressmen and doing all these things about the 10 Commandments in classrooms, the first thing that I bring up when I'm talking with these people is, when's the last time that you read through the 10 Commandments with your children and explained all of them? When's the last time you actually read scripture with your children? When's the last time you had prayer time with your children? Do you even have the 10 Commandments in your own home? To expect your school to give your child any sort of spiritual nutrition, but you're not giving them spiritual nutrition at home, is just completely contradictory and hypocritical. Take physical nutrition, for example. That would be like me expecting the school to feed my child, but I don't feed my own child at home. That's just complete hypocrisy, and this false pious virtue signaling is a huge problem. But I bring up that example to say is that if you do not have your own home in order first, then it's just complete hypocrisy. And it points to the necessity of examining yourself before you examine other people. And no, again, I'm not saying that we can't have any of these interdenominational apologetical interactions or discourses or debates or anything at all. Again, I think they're good and necessary. No, again, for the 5 millionth time, I feel like I have to put so many disclaimers in a video like this. I'm not advocating for some sort of theological relativism or anything like that. Again, differences definitely matter. Past saints and martyrs have died for their beliefs. I'm not trying to spit on their grave in any way. Well, what I'm saying is that I think there needs to be a real intensive movement towards fixing internal problems before looking outwardly. By doing so, then hopefully we can then approach these interdenominational interactions with humility, humbleness, and love. Now that I've covered those 2 points, I think they culminate together to make this final point, which is neglecting the truly lost. A bit more context for me is apologetics is actually a huge part of my life and a big part of my study, and it's what I devote almost all of my free time towards. I study a lot of the religious worldviews out there, but in particular, I focus on Jehovah's Witness first and foremost, but also Islam and Mormonism. So for all the Mormons who commented on my last video, I'm very sorry, but I will not be joining your ranks anytime soon. And you don't have to study outward apologetics for long to really understand just how lost these people truly are. It truly, truly breaks my heart that these people do not know the triune God, and I pray that they come to see the truth. And this is typically where the interdenominational apologetics start, where someone says, oh, well, they're not real Christians either. But the last time I checked, mainline Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox all believe in the triune God, and the second part of the Godhead came down incarnate and died on the cross for our sins and had a bodily resurrection and will come a second time. And last time I checked, Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, and Islam all reject this. So by simple math, they are the truly lost. But I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in arguing over sola fide and icons and whatever else. I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in arguing over sola fide and icons and sola scriptura and infallibility and Pope and whatever else that we forget to acknowledge the over 2 billion combined members amongst these other religious worldviews. And these are just the groups that I study. There's plenty of other religions out there that also join these ranks of truly, truly lost. And so it breaks my heart a bit to see an Orthodox attack a Protestant over sola fide, or a Catholic attack a Orthodox over the Pope, or the Protestants attack both traditions and say they're the traditions of men. Meanwhile, that there are billions of people out there that do not know the triune God and desperately need him. So I'm not invalidating any one true church claims or anything like that, but can we all just kind of mutually agree to get these people to the gates of the kingdom first, and then we can argue over who is correct? I feel like C.S. Lewis put this best in the preface of Mere Christianity when he put it like this. He says, "It is more like a hall out of which doors open into several rooms. If I can bring anyone into that hall, I shall have done what I attempted. But it is in the rooms, not in the hall, that there are fires and chairs and meals. The hall is a place to wait in, a place from which to try various doors, not a place to live in." It's also funny, he also warns about the dangers of interdenominational apologetics years ago when he wrote this book. But what I want to argue right now is that getting people into the hall is paramount to the Christian mission. And I feel like sometimes we're so busy shouting at each other about which door is the correct door that we don't even hear the people knocking on the front door wanting to come in. Or possibly even worse, someone's approaching the front door and is about to knock, but they hear all the chaos and shouting on the inside that they decide that they're actually probably better off staying out there. Again, I go back to St. Cyril's letter to Nestorius because he says that false teaching could potentially lead the little ones to stumble. And I think that principle could also be applied here. And of course, Jesus actually talks about this as well. Whether that be false teachings, bad faith actors, or in our case, uncontrolled pride in the form of defending the faith could potentially hinder someone in their pursuit of Christ, which St. Cyril is pretty clear on the Lord's stance on this issue. When it comes to solutions for this problem, two things come to mind. One is what I touched on earlier in Matthew 7, where Jesus says that we need to take the log out of our own eye first. We need to examine ourselves first, look inwardly, and then we can examine our brother, and of course still approach our brother with humility and respect, which I think honestly should just be the default response to everything. But the second solution to this is I think we need to reclaim a term that's been lost. I want to reclaim a term that's actually done a lot of harm to us in the past. That term being progressive Christianity. Secular liberalism under the guise of Christian reform has done a lot of damage to our churches and institutions. But when I hear that term progressive Christianity, I think about what it could possibly be. Progressive Christianity could be a label for Christians who have a particular focus on the advancement of the kingdom at all costs. In other words, Christians who are focused on progress. And of course, progress that's grounded in real conservative theological truth. If it doesn't move the needle, then I'm not interested. If it doesn't contribute to the kingdom, then I'm not interested. If it doesn't ultimately contribute to the Great Commission, then I'm just not interested. Like, I want to be focused on progress at all costs. Sola progresses, if you will. Someone I've been reading a lot of recently is St. John Chrysostom, and he has a quote that's really stuck with me these past few weeks. He says, "There's nothing colder than a Christian who's not concerned about the salvation of others." And I've been thinking a lot about this quote and this kind of progressive Christianity thing that I've been thinking about and kind of marrying those two together. And I think that there's some real benefits to this. Having this progress first mindset could help us in a lot of areas, with one of those being that it would just cut down on a lot of unnecessary arguing. Every time that you go to have an interaction, if you would think to yourself first, does this contribute to the kingdom at all? Or is this a waste of time? That right there would help us be able to kind of draw a line between what's productive conversation versus what's just pride and the want to argue. I think this also just helps us orient ourselves to Matthew 7 by asking ourselves, does this actually serve the kingdom in some beneficial way? It forces us to slow down and be mindful, which ultimately leads to approaching things in humility first, instead of just having this urge to just launch at someone as soon as the opportunity presents itself. And not to mention, because you're serving the kingdom, you are a representative of the kingdom, and therefore you should definitely be acting accordingly, which should be the case anyways, but that's another video. And lastly, it keeps us connected to what Jesus left us with. Jesus left us with a few things, but he only left us with one task. He says to go make disciples of all nations. As always, I thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me that you stuck around this long and you watch my silly YouTube videos. If you want to see more of these, make sure to click subscribe, comment, like, all those things. And I'll see you in the next one.